Brendan O Keeffe. So Eoin is an LCPE teacher and author of the LCPE textbook Peak Performance, and Brendan is a lecturer in health and PE at UL, and they'll tell you a little bit more about themselves in a minute as well. Both Eoin and Brendan were consulted and contributed to the development of our Athena FitnessMark. And if you don't know what that is, it's a fitness testing tool developed especially for PE teachers. And I have a very short 1-minute video which just explains it, so you don't have to be listening to me. So we'll just get that out of the way now, and I will play it for you now.
The Athena FitnessMark is a new dynamic tool for schools to positively encourage and support the physical health and well-being of every student. The FitnessMark is a platform for recording a battery of fitness tests. These results can then be easily compared with the student's class, year group, and national database. This information gives the school a complete, holistic overview of each student's physical health and allows the school to support their students in health and wellness. With the FitnessMark, students can observe their own strengths and weaknesses and how they compare with students of the same year group and gender. This gives them ownership of their own fitness and wellness from an early age. For some, it may even be the beginning of a journey to sporting success and the lifelong happiness, joy, and life skills that can be found in the pursuit of any sport.
So that is our Athena FitnessMark, and without further ado, we'll get stuck into our topics, and I will hand you over to Eoin and Brendan. If you guys could introduce yourselves first of all, and then I'll introduce the first topic. So Eoin, do you want to go first?
Yeah, very good. So hi everyone, my name is Eoin Joy. I'm a physical education teacher in Coláiste Iad Joseph in Abbeyfield, County Limerick. I was part of the phase 1 of the introduction of Leaving Cert PE there, which is nearly 5 years ago at this stage, and have been involved in that ever since, both in school and also with the State Examinations Commission. So I suppose, yeah, that's my little introduction. Brendan.
Yeah, hi everyone, my name is Brendan O Keeffe. I'm a lecturer in health and physical education at the University of Limerick in the Department of Physical Education and Sports Science, and I lecture predominantly across the physical education program, and specifically around the topics of health and performance related fitness. And I would have done my doctorate in the area of monitoring fitness in school settings. So really interested in catching up with Eoin today and having a discussion around the PE landscape and specifically fitness monitoring in schools. So yeah, that's me.
I think I actually bumped into Brendan when I came back from Australia maybe 6 years ago at a PEI conference. And I previously done a master's in physical fitness testing as well, and thought I was quite knowledgeable in the area until I met Brendan, and he kind of blew me away. And yeah, so I've been learning a lot more about it ever since from Brendan, from another perspective. So I think working then with Brendan and looking at developing this particular FitnessMark was very interesting, and really happy with the product that's there now at the moment from Athena.
Very good. So I'm sure both of you will want to talk about the first topic that we have. So students in school being far more aware of fitness and taking ownership of their fitness. Now, who would like to talk about that first?
Yeah, I might lead out in that, and we can link in then, Brendan. I suppose I'm teaching now in secondary education for just over 10 years, and I would say that previously team sports would have been would have dominated a lot of the school curriculum and a lot of what was happening. I think there's been a mixture of curricular changes in Ireland, as well as interest from students, which has kind of pushed this now a lot towards maybe health-related fitness, and just individuals being far more aware of their health and far more interested in learning about things like resistance training. And yeah, so I think firstly, pupils themselves, I feel now, are striving more for information from teachers, are looking to the school and the school programs to help them develop these aspects. And luckily, I do think that the platform is there within secondary schools and with the skill sets of PE teachers to support this. So it certainly is a big departure from when I started teaching 10 years ago. Want to jump in, Brendan?
Absolutely, yeah. I think summarized quite well. I think really it is, you know, the explosion in the social media age has been a kind of a source for this increased awareness among adolescents in particular around things like body image, fitness, and there's obviously been pros and cons to that. And I think, you know, the PE teacher has a really important role in I suppose using those platforms as a source of positive change. So I think I think, like, we see physical activity trackers, you know, I mentioned social media, students are far more aware now than ever. And I think it's a case of a lot of times we hear in the media how that can be framed as a negative, but you know, I think that can be flipped on its head as well, and we can use those tools as sources of positive change. And we've seen, you know, we've recently come out of a pandemic, and we've seen, you know, some prominent people in the fitness industry really, you know, take advantage of that to the likes of your social media platforms to be a source of positive, powerful change. So yeah, absolutely, there's no question in that. I'd be involved in the survey, the CSPA study, which is the Children's Sports Participation and Physical Activity Study. It'd be Ireland's kind of most comprehensive survey of students' participation in physical activity, and what we're seeing is definitely an increase in that space of individual fitness activity as opposed to team sports. So it's definitely an area that there's increased focus on. Yeah.
Yeah, and within the secondary school setting, then I do see it as a very healthy, positive departure, because I think there's a lot of increased motivation to participate in physical education within school settings as a result. In my own school context, we would have a school hall and a school gym, and when it comes to senior cycle PE now and the new senior cycle framework, related to health related activity, it's a very, very popular area for our students in terms of creating individualized programs and goal setting. So I see students now who are very motivated, very engaged with that, who I think might not have been as well served if we were just doing team sports and maybe more traditional PE. I really think that the curricular changes that have happened in this country over the past 10 years with the big shake-up of junior cycle and related to senior cycle framework and also Leaving Cert physical education is now providing us with a platform to really help these students and allow them to achieve fitness goals. I suppose with that, with all this change for PE teachers, I know it's going to take time for all of us to understand exactly what this is going to mean for our programs and for our programs long term. However, personally, I see it as very positive, and already I think even students in our school are reaping the rewards of that, specifically related to that area of we'll say health-related fitness and the use of the gym in schools.
Brilliant.
I might ask you a question there, Brendan, if you don't mind, related to that.
Of course.
I would have a background myself in strength and conditioning, so I'm quite comfortable in a gym setting, in a gym scenario, and leading out to a group of students. I know that with these curricular changes, there has been a lot of investment in secondary schools in gym equipment, and specifically a move away from your more traditional fixed resistance machines to a lot more free weights. And with that has come a lot of hesitancy, maybe a lot of worry for PE teachers and school principals. So where do you feel we are at related to that? Is there a little bit of a gap there? Is there anything related to a bit of research that has come out on that, or what would you like to add related to that?
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, I do, one part of my job is to go around to schools and observe pre-service teachers in schools, and like, it's just been unbelievably heartening to see schools invest so much in fitness suite facilities. So in almost it's become the norm now that you walk into a PE hall and you have a fitness suite off it. in many schools. I appreciate some schools won't have access to those facilities, but I think it's a reflection of that first theme around increased awareness and I suppose the demand amongst students to get more exposure to the likes of resistance exercise, which you mentioned. In terms of like what's actually happening on the ground, is there any research to back it up? Well, yeah, we are doing some research at the moment on resistance exercise practices in schools, and what we're finding is that it's actually one of the most common themes that PE teachers address. But the disconnect is actually in pre-service teacher education, where many of our pre-service teachers indicated that they felt that they didn't receive adequate training in that space. So that kind of builds upon your comment there around, you feel that you have a background in S&C, so you feel comfortable going in front of students and maybe doing, performing exercise, talking about technique. But I think it's really the onus is on the pre-service teacher education institutions to kind of keep pace with this curriculum reform that has been transformative. Like I know, I'm conscious that there's a lot of PE teachers that have signed up for this, but there are some principals, and those maybe outside of the PE space as well, that maybe not as familiar with, just how much has changed. But as we know, in 2018, for the first time, we had the introduction of the Leaving Cert examinable, the introduction of Leaving Cert as an examinable subject, Leaving Cert PE as an examinable subject. And that really has been a watershed moment for the subject, and has resulted in schools placing more of a focus, more of an emphasis, and I suppose investment around fitness and the facilities to allow their students to engage in the various fitness practices. So I think that kind of summarizes it really, Eoin. It's a growing space and only going to get bigger.
Yeah, and just to add to that there, and we're not, we're going to speak about Leaving Cert physical education, in a while, and where we're at with that at the moment. But schools have to pick 3 physical activity areas to focus on, and one which is extremely important is personal exercise and fitness. And with that, I get a number of phone calls there monthly from teachers saying that, look, they're looking to do this, they're looking to invest in equipment for their school, and would I have information or guidance around that? And I'm just giving it from personal experience, but it's amazing how this particular area has gathered momentum over the past couple of years. And again, for me, it's a very positive thing. But I know teachers, PE teachers, are looking for maybe more development or more upskilling in the area to be confident to deliver maybe resistance exercise safely to students. So I know it's certainly an area worth keeping an eye on.
Cool. All right, thanks for that, guys. So the next topic is PE as a platform to positively impact fitness and knowledge on physical fitness. So who'd like to comment on that first?
You can set the tone on this one, Brendan, if you don't mind. Yeah,
no problem. Like I think I might be preaching to the converted here for anyone who's logged onto the call, but like PE is without doubt the primary vehicle to promote engagement in physical activity in schools, and PE teachers are those with the expertise to promote and encourage students to engage in physical activity. And in Ireland, we have a phenomenal network of clubs and societies that do excellent work. But at the end of the day, really, we only know that all students attend, all adolescents, children, adolescents attend schools, and in the secondary school space, the PE teachers with that expertise to kind of foster that love for physical activity. And it is still the only subject that has an explicit focus on physical activity. And I think up until the recent curriculum reforms that we mentioned under the previous topic, and we'll come back to again, we almost had to fight our corner as such as a subject. But I think now we're seeing that there's an increased awareness among school management, and even wider school community. Parents are a lot more interested in PE as a subject. Yeah, at parent-teacher meetings, at there's just a greater awareness of the role the subject has to play. And I think I think more than anything else, the recent curriculum developments have done so much to address those subject hierarchies that we would have, I suppose, when I would have been teaching as well, that we've all witnessed and experienced, that maybe the more traditional academic subjects, PE would have almost been looked down upon as fun and play, but we're seeing now that that's slowly changing for the better, and that's a really, really positive thing.
Yeah, I really pick up on the point you made there about, you know, PE being a vehicle for physical activity, maybe engagement, but as well as that, to try and foster a love of physical activity for lifelong within students. I think that as a PE teacher and as a practicing PE teacher, I'm in a really privileged position and in a really powerful position to be that person to maybe show students that there is more opportunities than just team sports. I really do see it in schools. You have a cohort to come in first year, and they're very already, you know, that they have high levels of physical activity engagement. They're very comfortable and confident with movement and with physical activity. And while my job as a PE teacher is to support those and to continue to help them in their development, I certainly see a huge role for me is to look out for those who maybe haven't had positive associations with physical activity in the past, and to try and find them a platform with which they can engage and maybe develop a greater sense of happiness when they're being physically active, because we all know of the benefits that can be derived from that, not only from a physical perspective, but also from a social perspective as well. What's very interesting actually in Leaving Cert PE, this is studied, and it's studied by students. And the conversations that come from that are very interesting. And for the most part, those are the students who pick the subject, who are those students who are self-motivated within sport and within physical activity. But what I've noticed is, having had those conversations and them studying this area, when it comes to our more standard physical education classes, that they're far more accepting of decisions that we make as a department to try and support everyone in decision making around what activities we put on. So while in the past those students might have been the ones preaching for the team-based sports, I can see that they now help and facilitate others to become involved in whatever the decisions are. So yeah, I think as a PE teacher, I really think that we are in a real powerful position to try and to help students with physical activity and lifelong physical activity. So
cool. So moving on to the appropriate use of fitness testing in schools. Do you want to chat a bit about that?
I'm happy to lead on that, on, if you don't mind, and you can come in. Like I mentioned briefly at the start of the webinar that I would have done my own thesis, my doctoral thesis would have been based on appropriate and inappropriate pedagogical approaches to delivering fitness in school settings. And you know, it's for those outside of the space, I suppose it's one of the most highly contested areas, is that, you know, the place of fitness testing. But invariably what the research always came back to was that if appropriately employed, fitness testing in schools can be a very positive mechanism to promote engagement in physical activity. But the key part of that sentence being that if it is appropriately employed. And I think it's important to state and make it clearly that if it's inappropriate approaches to use of fitness testing in schools, which I can mention a few shortly, but that can actually have a very negative impact on students' participation in physical activity. So I think what's really key is that we get the actual how it's being done in schools, the methods that are being used to deliver fitness testing in schools. We get them right, because I think we've moved on from the space of whether we should do it or whether we shouldn't do it. We know, we have the research to back it up, that if it's done appropriately, it can be very positive. So now we need to move into the space of, okay, how can we do that? How can we use those pedagogically sound approaches? So just to briefly mention in the first place, maybe a few of the appropriate approaches, and then maybe some of those things that should be avoided. And I'm sure Eoin might come in with one or two more from his experience in schools as well. But in the first place, really, the focus needs to be on student learning as opposed to the data in the first place, so that the teacher really has a role there in that they implement the tests as part of a broader physical education unit, and specifically maybe a fitness education unit of learning, where students are encouraged to monitor their health or performance related fitness as part of maybe a broader program. And I think we mentioned there about the massive curriculum reform, the introduction of Leaving Cert PE in 2018. Most recently, we'll have a new junior cycle specification that's coming on stream in September. There's a senior cycle physical education curriculum as well. All of those documents explicitly state they include learning outcomes around students being able to monitor and improve their physical fitness. So therefore, there's a clear onus and a responsibility on teachers to be able to teach students how to do that. So what might you do? You might use the test results to set goals for students that might form the basis of a broader program that fits really neatly into the likes of your physical activity project at Leaving Cert, or what will be now what has been your CBAs, your classroom-based assessments at junior cycle. Also tracking the students' results over time. So one part of my PhD was around, I wanted to see what was actually happening in schools. And what I found was that 1 in 2 teachers were discarding students' results after a single use. So therefore, students were coming into PE class, they were doing these tests, and the tests had no more basis for the students. So the results were actually not being tracked over time. And that very much goes against those pedagogically sound approaches that we're trying to promote, that they inform program design, that they're tracked not only just within a program, but maybe across years, which platforms like the Athena, the FitnessMark obviously facilitate that. So I think that's a really key point. And the other one then is that, you know, to not forget our sole role as a teacher, or one of our key roles as a teacher, to provide individual feedback to students. You know, use the results to say, okay, you performed well in this component or this area, maybe you need to focus on this area a little more, and that's really key. And just to finish before I hand over to Eoin, maybe some of those areas that we need to avoid, or some of those inappropriate approaches, might include publicly displaying or announcing students' results. You know, we want to avoid a student, you know, in fear of performing a test, with maybe thinking that, okay, this result is going to be posted on a sports hall wall, which is really not appropriate use of fitness testing. Maybe, as I mentioned, including the tests in isolation of the broader curriculum, that the tests are discarded after a single use, or even comparing results against their peers. So there are methods that we can use to ensure we avoid students maybe performing a test all at once, using simple methods like a small station approach, small group approach, where students are responsible for taking their own measures, and it's done in a pedagogically sound manner. They can all help in creating that kind of more enjoyable approach to fitness monitoring in schools.
Yeah, I knew when you pitched that question, Teresa, that it might be wise for me to hold my counsel and leave Brendan lead out on that one. He's obviously an expert in the area, and I think he has summed it up exceptionally well there. And as he was talking, I was just kind of reliving some of my own experiences and my current experiences with fitness testing in schools. So I suppose from being straight out of college, it was something that I always did. Wasn't particularly sure exactly why I was doing it. I knew maybe that some students might enjoy it, and they might like to know who's the strongest in the class, who's the fittest in the class. I think as I gathered a bit of experience, I started to realize that potentially the approaches that I was taking to conducting fitness testing weren't the most appropriate. At that stage, I myself undertook a master's in physical education, with the focus being on fitness tested of secondary school students. And from that, I discovered some of the things that Brendan would have mentioned there. I think that since the introduction of Leaving Cert PE again, and the PAP that some teachers here are aware of, and we'll speak more about in a while, has really brought it home again that Teachers need to be very cognizant of how to use fitness testing and things like what tests are appropriate to use. I think it's a lot of these types of things and these questions about the appropriate use of fitness testing, what tests to use, what tests to use in the PAP specifically, had led me to think very deeply about my own practice and how to monitor it. As Brendan had said, 1 or 2 teachers maybe scrapped results. I definitely would have been in that cohort. Might have held them for maybe a week or 10 days or whatever, and then they were gone again if ever it was a case that I needed to refer back to them for students. So a lot of these things were kind of to the forefront when I was speaking with Emily originally here in the need maybe for a tool to help monitor, to help track fitness testing in secondary schools. And with all the curricular change that was in place, and with the need for information, it looked like a really good time to bring out a product like the FitnessMark. So you know, it was developed over the course of a long time. Obviously looking to experts like Brendan for guidance and advice, and looking to teachers like myself on the floor to see what is happening in secondary schools. And you know, from that, I do think that the product has been produced is a really strong product for contemporary physical education, and exceptionally handy and useful tool for teachers, but more importantly, a real powerful instrument for student learning. I think also added to that, it's a very discussing maybe some results and reports that the FitnessMark can produce with parents and parent-teacher meetings is also a powerful tool to highlight that maybe areas that their student or that their children are strong in, and maybe potential can be a conduit for conversation around their physical activity outside of school, and maybe what they should be focusing on. So yeah, I know I kind of looked at it from a slightly different perspective to Brendan there, but I think he covered it off really well, the appropriate use of fitness testing. But I just thought that it was a good opportunity to highlight maybe why FitnessMark has come on board and what the product is trying to achieve.
Yeah, good point. I suppose sticking to the fitness testing topic, Brendan, you probably want to answer this one first as well, but the Department of Education, their document that they released recently, the advice or guidance to students regarding the use of physical fitness testing and physical education lessons. Do you want to address a few things that came up on this, and maybe specifically about the bleep test?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a document that was released, I think in early December, maybe late November of last year, where basically the Department of Education got a group of people involved in this space and onto a working or a steering group committee to look at what are those inappropriate and inappropriate practices for monitoring fitness in schools. And the outcome was a very short 2-page document that, as I mentioned, was released, you know, in early December last year. And as can happen with media cycles, I think a lot of the media attention around that specific document was very misleading. Some of the headlines were just entirely inaccurate, really, and it was clear that they hadn't read the document. So for it, just to briefly summarize, the document is 2 pages, and it's written in very simple language and provides an outline of some of the recommended practices for fitness testing in schools. And one of the statements in the document was that tests to exhaustion, so maximal tests to exhaustions, which specifically fall under the component of cardiorespiratory endurance, or what people might understand as aerobic fitness, your ability to exercise for long periods, they were discouraged, but specifically at primary level, not at secondary level. And the reason, the steering group's committee rationale for that was that there are no specialist PE teachers at primary school in Ireland. Some primary school teachers have phenomenal expertise in physical activity and physical education. They get good training in their pre-service teacher education as well. There's no questioning that, but they are not trained PE specialists, and therefore was felt that the tests to exhaustion or maximal aerobic testing would be best avoided. However, the headlines that went out was that schools in general, post-primary and primary schools, that maximal tests were discouraged, and that simply wasn't the case at all, because it would directly contradict some of the, as I mentioned earlier, the learning outcomes that are now part of the junior cycle, senior cycle, and leaving certificate specification documents. So that was kind of the main thing around that. And what the document stressed was that if implemented appropriately, and I'm quoting it here, using pedagogically sound, student-centered approaches, it can make a worthwhile contribution to a broader PE program. And that was the main focus. So the points that the document was trying to emphasize was that, yes, fitness testing is just one very small, it's one component of a PE program and probably fits within a fitness education unit. So I think it'd be well worth people just reading the document. As I said, it's just 2 pages, and maybe making their own interpretation of it rather than directly go into the media cycles. Because I think I did an interview on Morning Ireland the day after it was released, and there was a massive outpouring of, I suppose that fitness testing in schools, it's a terrible thing, because again we were focusing more on students' past experiences, which we know we needed to address based on Eoin's research and some that I've quoted or some that I've mentioned as well. So I think I think the document is actually a good document, and it summarizes succinctly a lot of the points I would have just mentioned there around appropriate and inappropriate uses, but specifically around the test to exhaustion, that was for primary school students. And there was an important caveat to that as well. Research studies, like I mentioned earlier, the CSPA study, which happens every couple of years, there's every reason for that to continue at primary school level as well. So that was kind of a summary of the document. I don't know, Eoin, if there was anything else that you wanted to come in on that document as well.
No, I think, Brendan, you have a really good job on summarising that, and I think that's the message that should be going out.
Great. Emily, our founder, actually titled, when she heard about it, she said, "What the bleep" would be a great title for something around it, so I must give her credit for that. But also moving on to Eoin, you probably want to talk a bit about the next topic. You mentioned it already, the PAP in LCPE and fitness testing. Also, if you want to talk about the current landscape of LCPE now that we're 5 years in as well, that would be great.
Yeah, really good. So basically in September 2018, I think a lot of us on the call here now at this stage know that physical education as a leading subject was introduced into Irish schools for the first time. Really important departure, really exciting departure, and something that I've been heavily invested in ever since, and have had really positive experiences with it. I would going to start off when I maybe graduated from college initially, with a real hope that something that PE would become a subject in secondary schools. And a lot of more experienced teachers than me told me that they had been told for years that it would happen, and it hadn't happened. So I might as well forget about that dream, or that pipe dream, as it was labeled to me as one teacher. So maybe 4 or 5 years into my practice, I just took a career break. I was in Australia. I was teaching exam-level physical education in Australia, and really found massive value in it for the students and for myself professionally. Teaching areas like exercise physiology, sports psychology, sports nutrition were massively interesting to me, and I could see the engagement with students in the classroom and how beneficial it was for them and how engaging they found the subject. So when I came home to Ireland then in 2016, and there were murmurs that this could potentially be happening, and the government were committing to doing it and getting it out there, it was a massively exciting time for me as a PE teacher. So ultimately, when it did come on stream, I was in a new school. I had just changed schools and went heavily to the PE department and to the principal to pitch for it, and the importance of the subject for our school and for our locality, and the value it could bring to the communities around us. So we were really fortunate to be a phase 1 school. So we would have received training for the rollout of Leaving Cert PE, and in our initial year, maybe year or 18 months of teaching it from the PDST, and I must give real credit to the guys involved in that. At the time, you had Brendan O'Malley, you had Fergal Lyons and Stephen Moore, and they gave us great training, they gave us great structure, great support. They were excellent to build communities of practice for PE teachers, so that we could support each other and help each other with delivering out on what was a really big piece of work. So like that's the backdrop to it. I'm going to let Brendan jump in a second, and I'll come back and jump on it again in a few moments. If you want to maybe, Brendan, speak about your initial experiences of it, or your thoughts and feelings around it.
Yeah, I suppose in short, what we found in the third level space is that students were coming in to those that had been through the 2 years of leaving Cert PE with a phenomenal amount of knowledge around material that we probably would hardly even have covered in our own third level degree. So I think it's I think it's really been a massive, it's been a massive momentous development for the subject. And you mentioned a good few there. It can't be overstated really how much of a positive impact the introduction of LCPE has had on the broader subject, and the status I mentioned earlier about the status of the subject in secondary schools. And I think really, again, coming from my perspective, we're still trying to keep pace with that change, and some of the skills that students, and just to briefly touch upon this, some of the skills that students are coming through LCPE with as a subject in terms of digital technology. I mean, 50% of the grade, granted there's documents with some of this, but 50% of the grade is based on digital technology, your ability to record, analyze, evaluate, skills that go far beyond, the PE space itself. And again, I'm thinking back to that idea of the fitness tracker and being able to track those results over time. That's real deep learning for students, and I think those skills are proper lifelong skills. There's countries internationally that are moving towards that idea of a concept-based approach, where you're not actually teaching, we'll say, soccer or Gaelic football or whatever the sport might be, but you're actually teaching the concept of something like resilience, of being able to critically evaluate something, and those skills are absolutely, implicit in a student's experience of LCPE. So it really has been a massively positive change for the subject.
Yeah, in terms of teaching, learning, and assessment, I suppose my own experience of actually teaching it has been amazing. It's been really fulfilling as a teacher. All of the hope that I had for the subject coming into it, and what it might do for me professionally, has surpassed all of that. It's given me massive motivation to to continue PE teaching, because I really do like the classroom environment, as well as maybe the hall environment. Getting into a classroom and having meaningful discussions with students around areas like nutrition, like supplementation, maybe going into some more difficult conversations around performance enhancing drugs and stuff, has been really just, again, really fulfilling as a teacher. And I really enjoy creating my classes, and really enjoyed engagement within those classes, because I see what it's doing for the students. I think as a PE teacher, I think you do have an opportunity to build up a certain relationship with students through physical activity and through sport. And when you can transfer that into a classroom environment, I really do feel that there are very open conversations about some meaningful topics that can help students. And then even, I think that relationship goes beyond the teaching and learning in school, then, that if students do have issues, that they can maybe come to you for a bit of support, because I think that the subject allows you to develop those relationships. What Brendan said there about what the subject is doing, maybe for maybe how it links to universities. I know that since the introduction of the subject in our school, the amount of students who have had a real keen interest in exploring a career pathway related to physical education has exponentially gone up. The amount of students who are looking for advice on maybe applying to Irish universities and help them pick out different courses related to sport, nutrition, physical education. It's just something that I wouldn't have experienced 5 or 6 years ago, but it's certainly on the agenda now, which again is really positive, I think, for our society and for Ireland in general. Related to assessment, there are a lot of people on the call here will know that there are 3 assessment pieces. 50% of Leaving Cert PE is exam based, and the other 50% is broken up between a 30% performance assessment and a 20% physical activity project. Without doubt, having 3 assessment pieces is challenging for a teacher, and is certainly challenging for students as well. And I think the more experience you get teaching the subject, the the more clever you become in how you approach the assessment pieces in terms of how much time you give to each. Some of the skills that Brendan mentioned, it is amazing. So I suppose first of all, as a teacher, you certainly have to upskill. I suppose starting out the journey, I had some bit of digital literacy, but has certainly increased massively. When you're trying to support, well, in my first year, it was 40 students in the development of physical activity projects, which require 3 pieces of 3 videos and a digital booklet. So there were certainly challenges within that, but I mean, that skill set I've developed and I'm very confident with that now. But it's great that the students develop those skill sets as well. The performance assessment, I think, is a really important piece for the subject, in that it's rewarding students for their actual capacity and ability to perform a particular sport or physical activity. So I know for many years people felt that physical education deserved Leaving Cert points, just like other practical subjects did. And now that it's on board, I do feel that while a lot of the subject is focused on obviously the theoretical aspects of physical education, I do feel strongly that the performance of students is rewarded as well. And we have a performance assessment to do that. I know we're early doors in the subject, and again, over time, potentially the performance assessment may get reviewed and it may get shaped, make it as appropriate for school settings as possible. But I think there are conversations for other days. And the piece that we have at the moment, we're currently in the window to record that in schools at the moment. So I know we had a snow day today in school, and I had we had a lot of preparation done to conduct a lot of recording in our performance assessment today. So that's out the window now. So again, as a teacher, you've got to be flexible, and we'll have to plan accordingly and get another occasion to do it. But it's I think the reality of a PE teacher is a lot of moving parts, and yeah, Leaving Cert physical education certainly challenges you in many ways, but it also develops you hugely. So while there have been massive challenges, I'm really happy that I am a physical LCPE teacher. I'm really happy to having gotten in on the phase 1 and having a lot of skills developed, and consistently taking calls from teachers to try and support them and help them with maybe some of the learnings I've had. Yeah.
Cool. So that kind of wraps up our topics that we had, but I suppose while we have you guys, so some of the schools that are already signed up to our Athena FitnessMark, we have frequently asked questions, a list of them that we just keep. So I might just put them to you now. So I've one specifically for you, Eoin, first of all. So why did you pick, because you contributed obviously massively to the Athena FitnessMark and the development of it, why did you pick these specific tests?
It's actually an interesting one here, because when I was co-authoring the textbook Peak Performance, one of the areas within it obviously is fitness testing, and we were looking at the development of an appropriate battery of fitness tests around health-related fitness and around performance-related fitness. I definitely consulted Brendan when I was doing that to ensure that maybe my ideas were aligned to his ideas, so that maybe best practice, so that I could get the most appropriate tests. So I suppose first off, the Leaving Cert P specification requires you to look at fitness testing within health-related fitness and performance-related fitness. There are 11 components overall, so that's initially what we're looking at. We did want to get testing for each of those components. Next up, it was around picking the most appropriate test within each component, and there was possibly two strong factors at play there. One being the validity and reliability of the test for that component, and again, I would have gotten a good bit of consultation advice from Brendan on that. And then secondly, would it be the ease of administration and probably cost effectiveness of a school to implement that particular test. So for the product, we didn't want to have high-tech, high-expensive equipment required to run the test, because obviously that wouldn't be feasible in a number of schools. So I think the battery of tests that we came up with were valid and reliable and easy for schools to use and implement. would be the best way of summarizing it.
Great. And do they link in with LCPE in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose with that, as I said, in the Leaving Cert Physical Education specification, you have to do fitness testing of health-related fitness and performance-related fitness. Within the physical activity project, many students, in fact, most students that I would have worked with when developing performance goals would have performance goals related to health or performance-related fitness. So just to really quickly give an overview, it's a case of you need to test yourself in a particular area. You need to then put in programs, specific programs and training plans in place to try and develop that particular aspect, and then to retest at the end. So, for example, many of my students would look at something like power, would use an appropriate test for power, then develop a program, and then test again at the end. So with the FitnessMark, we wanted to ensure, again, that students doing the PAP could use this particular piece of software to, first of all, to use the actual maybe manual or booklet to look at how exactly the test is most appropriately administered, and then to actually conduct a test, to store their data, to track their data, and as well, a lot of maybe analysis within the physical activity project. Students go look and they might compare their own results to something like a classmate. They might compare it to averages, they might compare it to norms. So again, the FitnessMark could have helped them with that. So yeah, it all ties in nicely.
Okay, perfect. Before I get to your couple of the frequently asked questions for you, Brendan, I just see some people putting some questions in the Q&A, which is great. If you would mind, could you put your names, don't choose the anonymous option, just in case we don't have time to do the questions that we can follow up to you afterwards and email you the answer. So anyway, Brendan, I've got a question here for you. Would you still recommend schools to use the bleed test as a fitness test in schools, or would you recommend an alternative?
Yeah, so each context is different. That's the first thing to say. And like there isn't a kind of a one size fit all approach. Ideally, we'd have everyone doing very similar tests because the tracking just becomes a lot more easy then. But we have, there are lots of very powerful statistical equations that you can use multiple different tests and use those equations to give you a calculation of ultimately what you're measuring in the case of bleed test, which is your aerobic capacity, your cardiorespiratory endurance, and get very similar results. So comparing lab-based tests against your typical field-based test like the bleed test or the 12-minute Cooper run or a 6-minute run or a 1 mile run. There's so many variations of tests. Now, what I would say is that I can understand the logic. I can understand why the bleed test or the 20-meter shuttle is the most commonly used, because it's the one that has the most proven validity for use in school-based settings when compared against the gold standard test of a VO2 max in a lab-based setting. However, I know a lot of teachers are using the likes of a 12-minute Cooper run as an alternative. What I would say is that in the first place, what's most important is that whatever test you're using it in a pedagogically sound manner. And there's an excellent question in the chat box that we'll come back to develop on that maybe a bit more. And the second one is that and this kind of builds upon the second frequently asked question, I think, Teresa, is around the protocols that are being used. You in establishing very firm standardized protocols on whatever test is being used. And I do think students have the capacity to administer tests in a valid and reliable manner if they received the appropriate familiarization training, and they're not just going in on the first day and maybe conducting tests with each other, having never done it before. So I think there are definitely ways to go about maximizing the standardization and the validity of the test results that are done, and that's a really key step.
Okay, great. So you mentioned it already about the testing protocols, but the second question I had was, all of the FitnessMark tests are conducted without strict testing protocols in place. Do you think this poses an issue to use the resulting database as a benchmark?
I don't. It's a question we might come back to in the chat, because I think whoever asked it has summarized it very, very well. Totally in support of the concept of fitness testing, but has questions around the accuracy. We have done some research in UL around student administered tests against trained researchers administered tests, and what we found is that there's actually very little difference. But the key thing being that the students need to have received the familiarization training, that the teacher would need to have gone through how to perform that specific test in the correct manner, and then students can gather valid and reliable data. I appreciate that becomes a whole massive other challenge when you're dealing with a much bigger population, would say, at a national level, if Athena is looking at national norms and whatnot. But I think there's countries that have done it and that use this data regularly. Several European countries, Slovenia, Hungary being the two probably most prominent, and they use this data to inform interventions, government policy. And I think there's no reason why we can't get to that point with the use of those standardized protocols. Things like videos, manuals can really help.
I think as well, related to the physical activity project, and when students are analysing their performance and looking for data, they can find it quite difficult to find data on their particular age and gender, for example. I know an awful lot of times kids continuously come up to me and looking for data on the 20-meter sprint test, and it can be difficult to find. So having a database to refer to and to use is brilliant from the context of the PAP. Related to that particular question, like that is not an issue for reporting in the PAP. It's great to have that data, and it's nice for students to be able to use it.
Perfect. All right, guys, so I'm kind of conscious of the time now. We've 4 minutes left, so we might go straight to the questions, and we'll try and get through some of them. So the
one
first...
there, Teresa, from Emer McGrath. I was just worried that Emer might come up with a difficult question for us. Myself and Brendan would know Emer quite well. But,
very good. Well, I can take this one. So, yeah. So she said, if your school is using the Athena academic tracker, is this part of the package or is it separate? So Emer, it's not part of the package, it's an add-on, but saying that if your school doesn't have the Athena tracker at all, it can be purchased as the standalone product as well. So hope that answers that. Okay, so we might jump down to James Campbell's one first of all. So James Campbell says, I think FitnessMark is an excellent addition to the students' experience of PE. I wish it was there when I was in school. I was just wondering if you have any advice for students who struggle with physical testing and looking after their self-esteem. Additionally, I foresee pressure from parents who do not want their daughters to do it because it's causing anxiety, etc. Have you any advice on how to handle this?
I might just quickly jump in here. Like I think it comes back to I've listed maybe 4 or 5 key things that, and I can share information with whoever registered for the webinar around those appropriate and inappropriate pedagogical approaches that I've been mentioning. But I think creating that comfortable environment for the students can really help in that regard. So a quick example for the example of their daughter and anxiety. If you use that small station approach that Eoin and I might have mentioned earlier, where students are maybe in groups of 4 or 5 and rotating and completing the stations in that manner, why not have music playing in the background, for example, and have the students select that music? The idea is that just creating that comfortable environment, that this is a space for learning, and that it shouldn't be feared. And there are loads and loads of other ways to support that, but that's just one very simple mechanism maybe to go about kind of reducing the anxiousness that comes with, oh geez, I have to perform a test here. And one very other brief one, I would never encourage, for example, a bleed test, that your class of 24 complete the test all together at once. So a simple way around that might be, option A might be to split the class in half. So 12 and 12 do it, and you pair the students up and they observe each other. Or option B, which I see some schools doing now, is giving the students the choice. So in the hall, we'll run the 20-meter shuttle run test, or outside you have the option of maybe doing the 12-meter Cooper run. So putting the responsibility back on the students might really help there. So I hope that helps some bit, James. But it's a really good question.
Yeah, and thanks for that question, James, and thanks for the nice comments about the FitnessMark at the start of it. I would just like to add, and to finish up, that obviously this is a concern, and it's an area that we continuously experience in physical education. But as a teacher, you use your skill set around it to see how far we can support these students related to fitness testing. Within the package, there are some very, like what I would describe as maybe non-invasive, quite simple tests to conduct, and things like your flexibility, your sit and reach test, maybe your hand-eye coordination test. And, you know, I think for me, I definitely would start with those type of ones, to maybe get the students to feel at ease with it. For the ones that might be that little bit more difficult for students to engage with, there's always the potential for them to help their friends to do the measurements for them. And then over time, they might develop the confidence to give it a go itself. But I do think as a teacher, you have the autonomy to conduct it in whatever capacity you want. And you'll know you might have to do it differently with different classes, depending on the students in front of you. And that's just the experience that you develop over time as a teacher, yeah.
Brilliant. I love the suggestion of the music. I'd have totally been up for that, Brendan. But yeah, I think that's everything now answered and everything. If anybody has any other questions, I know because our hour is up now, feel free to email them to info@athena.ie and someone will get back to you there straight away. We'll be sending a follow-up email as well after this, and we'll be sending a recording as well to anybody who wants it. So yeah, thanks everybody for coming, and thanks Brendan and Eoin. That was brilliant, very informative. And yeah, that's great. Thanks. Have a nice evening, everybody.
Thanks very much all. Take care.
Right.
Bye.